And Theron, with regard to the vice president, a lot of folks right now saying that she sort of shifted her initial disposition and strategy, concentrating now more on criticizing former President Trump instead of focusing on her own policies. Do you think that this new focus, is a strength, or should she revert back to policy-oriented campaigning?
I think if she had something strong to go on before she got this far into the criticism, then yes, she would have something to fall back on. But she doesn't. Her policies still leave a lot to be desired. There are still so many questions that are yet unanswered. And so her continuing to criticize former President Donald Trump about things we already know aren't helpful. Tell us something new. She needs to tell us something new about her. Give us the process by which she's going to enact some of these policies. Give us some clarity. Give us the step-by-step picture and allow us to understand as the American people why we should cast our vote for her. But simply telling us he's the bad guy and painting herself as the good person, it's not necessarily driving people to the polls.
A young U.S. Marine Corps veteran named Nicholas Quetz from right here in Arizona, you know about it, was driving through Mexico for a beach weekend, just a weekend with his friends, a really good guy, good kid. When he was viciously gunned down on the highway and murdered by members of a Mexican cartel.
Brian, by all accounts right now, many experts, if you will, are saying that the people's decision has been made. Right now, it's really going to be up to enthusiasm. Trump's been focusing on this issue of the border, top issue for many Americans it is. On the other hand, do you think that this messaging might not be working for some of the folks that he might have a chance of swaying?
No, I think it is, because if you look at the groups that Kamala Harris needs to sway, she is falling flat. We saw her go from 0 to 60 really quick coming out of the convention. She had a really good debate performance, and then she stalled out. This immigration issue and the crime that is bringing is one of the top issues for Americans, right behind the economy. Here in Georgia, where I live, Laken Riley, who was on a jog outside of the campus of the University of Georgia earlier this year, was raped and murdered by a criminal illegal alien that had not been deported after being arrested the first time. This is something that is very real to American voters. We have a right to know who is coming here. And this is a major issue, and one reason why those groups that Kamala Harris needs, the persuadables, are going with Donald Trump, actually. You're talking about black men, you're talking about Gen Z voters, and in places like Arizona and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the college-educated voters in Atlanta, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, they are not going to Kamala Harris at the level that they need to, and this is just one of those reasons.
Theron, how does the vice president separate herself from some of those examples that Brian just laid out? And what do you think that her messaging should be in these final days when it comes to illegal immigration and the border?
I think she has to be honest with the American people about where she went wrong and exactly where her involvement was in the process. And that's something that she hasn't been exactly clear about. She's kind of tap danced around the issue each and every time she's been asked. And still, despite us being so close to Election Day, she doesn't have a thorough answer about what she's going to do about immigration going forward. In fact, she just recently said, there's a process and that migrants need to follow it.
Give them sex changes.
How conducive is that process for it to be legally done correctly all the way from the border through immigration, through gaining citizenship?
Brian, lastly, Trump's campaign has received quite a bit of praise in recent weeks for effectively softening his image from previous election years, if you will. How has non-traditional media contributed to this? And with his upcoming appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast and visits to, like he did at McDonald's, do you think that this is actually working, reaching, and resonating with new voters and maybe appealing to them to give him another look?
Far beyond what I could have imagined just a year ago. They are reaching folks who don't necessarily tune in to mainstream news, don't necessarily watch political news, but they get something that's got a little bit of entertainment / politics, and you're able to get these people who aren't necessarily tuned in all of the time. People feel a more strong connection to them in a 45-minute talk that includes some jokes, some laughter, maybe some personal anecdotes than they do in a 14-minute, 60 minutes interview that's solely about issues.
And Theron, lastly to you, Vice President Harris obviously coming into this race extremely late, raising the question or the reality that many Americans don't know her. So in recent weeks, she has picked up her presence in the media, doing more interviews. Do you think that the American people have gotten to know her enough yet, and will she have enough time to introduce herself to the American people?
I think she's had plenty of time. I think the best thing she could do now is just clarify everyone's burning questions. But I applaud her for doing more interviews, getting more into the media, but she waited far too late. There were too many things happening on social media and other forms of non-traditional media that were telling the story for her. She should have been out in front of it. She should have been clear from the very beginning. And I think if she had done that, it would show in all the polls, and it would certainly show on election day, which right now we would be looking at a different race had she been a little bit more transparent with the American public.
Brian Robinson, Theron Bond, really appreciate both of you joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, more than 35 million ballots already cast. We'll take you to Arizona and North Carolina, 2 states under scrutiny after 2020, to see what it's like on the ground this year. That and more